But yeah.
What is up, everybody? How we doing? It's Friday. It's the off season, and I'm joined by a special guest, my man Akash from Niners Nation. This is the first of a doubleheader tonight. I got another guest right after my man. So we got a busy night tonight, but let's get to it. Akash, how are you doing, man?
Doing pretty well, man. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to everyone listening. And it's been good. You know, they say it's the off season, it slows down, there's not news, but the 49ers, it always feels like there's something going on and there's some storyline or there's someone saying something. So it's been good. Slow off season so far, but can't complain.
Yeah, February was kind of slow. So, as I was telling you behind the scenes, I just filled my time with working and make sure these bills are paid, man. It's expensive out in California. You should know. But yeah,
Hell yeah.
off season, like you said, there's always news and things like that. But we got past February. After next week, it's free agency. We got March 15th coming up. March 13th, players can negotiate. So the Niners have a lot of things to kind of look into in terms of offseason because, again, I know the Combine's this week and they're looking at players that they may draft for the future. But before they even figure out who they're going to draft, they got to figure out who they're going to bring back. So I wanted to bring you on here and kind of talk about just that. I saw you post a few things the last week or so about key players the 49ers can bring back offensively, defensively. Maybe I want to ask you maybe what makes sense in terms of the salary cap. I think we got to start there, right? Salary cap. I think right now the Niners are like 18th, $5 million in cap space. Is that going to go up with the new league year? Or let me know.
Right. So I think right now they're around 6 million, somewhere between 5 and 6 million projected heading into next year. Obviously, there are some ways to increase that salary cap space. One of the ways that a lot of teams do is by releasing players. They cut players and immediately you save that salary and then you get extra cap space you can use free agency or to re-sign your own players. Unfortunately, the 49ers don't necessarily have that luxury. They don't have any players that, by cutting, you'd save a bunch of cap space. A lot of their guys just signed extensions, which means that, generally their dead caps are pretty high. And so the way you generally free up money there is by restructuring their contract, which is you just take their base salary this season, you convert that to a signing bonus, and then you're able to, prorate that over their life of their contract, which effectively means you knock down their cap hit this season. And then you save that money. And so I think there's a couple players. Eric Armstead is one, has a high base salary, has a couple years left on his deal. Fred Warner's another guy, same thing. He's a younger player who just signed his extension, high base salary. I could see him getting restructured. Christian McCaffrey has no guaranteed money in his salary left. I think he's got 3 years at $12 million apiece. So there are some ways for them to free up some cap space. I would expect them to do so. And I think Parag and his team, what they spend kind of these last few months is building out a bunch of plans, right? Like if we restructure this guy and this guy will free up this much. If we restructure these guys, we'll free up this much. And then they head to free agency and they kind of gauge, right around this time, right, during the combine of like, okay, what are our free agents worth? What are other teams' free agents worth? Who do we want to go ahead and sign? And they kind of make a plan over these next few weeks. And based off of that, they'll restructure and open up some cap space. And so I expect them to open up some money.
I do too, yeah, especially Parag, man. I don't know how he does it, but every year it's just like, oh man, the guy's a money wizard because you'll just see like last year, there's like no way you're bringing half of these guys back. The year they extended Trent Williams, you're just sitting there going, there's no way we get these guys back. But boom, every year they get players back. They re-sign a whole bunch of their guys. They did Eric Armstead last year. He did a little bit of restructuring. They gave Trent Williams upfront money guaranteed. I think a lot of similar things are going to happen this year. I think CMC is a guy that we'll probably hear that they'll give him upfront money and that kind of help save their cap space, things like that. So, yeah, 100%. I'm not too worried. I know they always get it done. It's just it's crazy. Right. You're sitting there, you're going, how do they do it, man? How do they do it? But, they do. They prorate the contract, which is good because you can add these players, which is contrast to a lot of teams like the Rams, right? They front load their contracts, they pay these guys, and then now they got these cap hits that they had to get rid of, like Bobby Wagner, and then things like that. You got a lot of teams that do it that way. They get these big players, they front load it, and they're like, crap, now we can't pay you. So obviously we're going
the
to
draft helps.
Yeah, the draft.
Right. When you have Juwan
Jennings
making 900,000, when you have Demo Lenore starting at, outside corner making 900,000, that helps balance the spreadsheet, right? You got to have, starters at some position making cheap money so that you can afford all these expensive guys. And ultimately, the Niners have done such a good job of that. They're able to keep some of these high price guys.
100%, especially those late round picks, 5th round, gems, 7th round, undrafted guys, making scratch on your team compared to everybody else, and they're getting starter minutes. So then, the Niners do a great job this year. What they have 11 draft picks, so I don't think they'll have all 11 drafted. I'm sure they'll move up, but I mean, still, you're going to get an abundance of talent that eventually will start. You got a guy like Sam Womack who might take a nickel spot this year, and he's a late round draft pick that might start. So we got Talanoa Hufanga. He's a 5th round safety.
5th round pick. Right.
Yeah, crazy, man. So going into free agency, obviously there's 49ers players that we want to see come back, right? I think Emmanuel Moseley jumps off the table for a lot of people. That's a guy that probably was about to get paid a lot of money, but unfortunately for him, his contract's going to be a little lower, maybe a 1-year prove-it deal because he's coming off a major injury. What do you think? You think the Niners are able to bring back Emmanuel Moseley? That's a guy that they feel, Lynch has kind of hinted that's a guy he wants to come back, depending on if he's willing to, which I think he is. And then also his injury, he got injured in week, was it 7 against the Panthers?
6, right?
Yeah, 5, week 5 against the Panthers. So, he might not even be back for the start of the season. So you can bring him back, save a little money on a prove-it deal, but then you still have a guy like Diameter Lenore who could come in and play his worth, initially.
I think that's the route I would personally go, because I thought Emmanuel Moseley was fantastic when he was playing in those first 4 or 5 games. I think he was top 10 in passer rating allowed. His PFF coverage grades were pretty good. He was solid across the board. Great, great tackler, great in run defense, and just someone that's just a high character guy that they love in the locker room as well. And so it was kind of a bummer when he got hurt. I know that week, 6 Atlanta game, a lot of people around the team, it was, let's win it for E-Man. Let's win it for E-Man. Just because it was such a gut punch, because he had such a good game and it was a non-contact injury thanks to the turf in Carolina. And so I think they'd like to bring him back. And again, money factors into it. I think Moseley was, like you mentioned, headed for a big payday, just because there's not very many good corners out there that also tackle. And E-Man's one of those. And, unfortunately, because of the ACL, I imagine that his market has taken somewhat of a hit. And, the 49ers have been in the spot before where they've had some corners who have gone down with injuries, and they generally come back on these 1-year deals. Jason Verrett comes to mind. And so I can see that happening. And what that effectively means is now you've got, Mooney Ward, obviously, on one side. You have Emmanuel Moseley, Diamador Lenore, Sam Womack, and these 4 guys probably competing for the 3 corner spots, assuming, Moseley can stay healthy and is ready to go come, when the season begins. So I like their cornerback, room right now. And I imagine Moseley wants to stay for one more season at least. And hopefully they can get something done there.
I do too. But again, I think we're also in competition against other coaches that were on the Niners, right? We got Robert Salah, you got D'Amico Ryan. So they might make a push and maybe offer a little bit more than we can do. But again, I would hope that E-Man comes back. And there's a couple other guys, speaking of secondary, the 49ers, Tashawn Gibson, it did sound like John Lynch wants to bring him back. And it looks like he's willing to come back because we all thought he might be retiring. But he did mention, Hufunga's a guy that would be a reason for him to come back. I think that duo. Jimmy Ward, it seems like the writing's on the wall that he wants to go get a cash in on his last, big chance to get a contract sometime in the league. He's been at the, league for 9 years. The infamous Instagram live, when he goes live, he just lets it flow, man. He's no filter. So I don't know. What do you think? You think Niners are able to get Jimmy Ward back or Tashawn Gibson, any of those guys? And if not, what's an option we can do for safety? Because safety is a glaring hole. Right now you have Hufanga and George Odom. That's it.
Yeah, it is a spot of concern for sure. I do think Jimmy Ward probably doesn't come back. I know some of the things he said in that Instagram live got taken out of context. I thought he spoke highly of the 49ers organization, Shanahan, Lynch. the defensive coaching staff, the players. And then, he said some things about, riding the bench and all that stuff. And I think he had a tough year, adjusting to playing a new spot. And it's hard. You're a pending free agent. A lot of these guys think about that stuff. They think about, man, it's a contract year. I got to get paid. I got to perform. I got to be able to, put some stats up. If you're a pass rusher, that's sacks. If you're a DB like Jimmy Ward, that's, PBUs, interceptions, stuff like that. And it's hard, making a positional switch like that. And we talked about it a lot at the start of the season. It was the best thing for the 49ers from a team standpoint. Gibson was playing really well. He had started off the season with Hufanga, the back end playing nicely. And so it made no sense to bench him and put Ward back in that spot, especially when you had to roll with a young guy, at slot corner and Sam Womack. And it made sense to put your best 11 on the field. And that included Jimmy Ward playing the slot or playing that, third linebacker role, fourth linebacker role. And he eventually came around. He accepted it. I thought he excelled in it. He got better at nickel corner as the season went along. And I imagine he's going to want to play safety again next season, which means my guess is he's going to look for that contract elsewhere. And like you mentioned, Robert Saleh, Jets could be a potential destination. D'Amico Ryans, Houston, maybe. And I think there's just other teams in the NFL that would like Ward, both as a player and a person. So I think, he's been here for 9 seasons, and I think that the writing's on the wall that he's probably not coming back. And, in terms of his replacement, I think Deshaun Gibson on a 1-year deal makes the most sense, especially if he wants to come back. He was an excellent run defender. And I think you go the draft route. I know the 49ers have met with a bunch of safeties at the combine, and I think you just go that route. They've got a bunch of third-round picks, a bunch of fifth-round picks. I think you just go to the draft, find you a safety, and see if you can replace and replenish the same way they found Hufanga, right? They found Hufanga when Tart was on the last year of his contract. He developed. Hufanga played some that year because Tart got hurt. Eventually, they just gave the spot to Hufanga. He earned it, and hopefully they can do the same again with Jimmy Ward and Deshaun Gibson this season.
Yeah, I agree. Rinse, lather, repeat. I think it's the same tried and true test with the 49ers. I think they'll probably end up bringing back Gibson on a 1-year deal. Hopefully they can convince him he could be a mentor for whoever they draft in the 5th round or whatever. And then, by that point, the guy will probably have played a little bit, and then Hufanga will be your veteran. And, and he could kind of be the guy that
how it goes.
Leaders them. Yeah, so I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Jimmy Ward, you're right. Writing's on the wall, man. Great player, but he could be of service somewhere else. And, he deserves to get his money. And I think you're right. With them putting him in the nickel spot, I think at some point he was like, look, I want to be a safety. I want to show that I can be a safety.
Right.
But he did say that he was so versatile. And now that's like he can pitch that to teams that, hey, I can do whatever you need me to do. But I want to focus on safety because the money's bigger in the safety market than the nickel corner. They could make Jimmy Ward the highest paid nickel, but it's like nothing compared to what.
And it would be peanuts in the safety market, which I think they told him mid-season, right? I think he mentioned that in the Instagram Live that we're like, we'll make you the highest paid nickel, like come back. And ultimately, I think the Niners would want him back. I just don't think the market is there. Yeah. I don't think they have enough money to, pay him probably what he thinks he's worth. So that's why I think he's not coming back.
Yeah, I think it's just going to come down to money. I think he would love to come back. I mean, 9 years on one team. He's, super loyal. So definitely going to suck to see him go, but they'll get somebody and we'll like them if they perform, bottom line, I mean, honestly, not a lot of fans, a lot of fans hated him for many years because he was always hurt. So, I mean, it was kind of a weird situation.
He's really come around probably in the Shanahan era since like 19. His stock among the fan base has gone through the roof, and he's been the same guy. He's just, different defensive schemes, different positions, moved around a bunch. And I think his personality really jives with the team. He's just, a more like outwardly expressive guy. So I think a lot of fans appreciate that and can relate to him. Yeah,
he keeps it 100. So, yeah, definitely. But switching gears now. So, obviously, secondary is a big talk. Defensive line, I think the the expectation is Nick Bosa is going to get his extension. But there were some players on that line that were not bad. You had a Samson Ebicam, you had a Jordan Willis, and you got Charles Omenihu. Those are depth pieces. I don't think they'll bring them all back. And I feel personally, D-line is one of their big priorities. I know a lot of people talk about O-line, but I feel like the D-line is somewhere where they really need to make sure that they keep the depth. I don't know if you bring any of those guys back. Maybe one of them. Drake Jackson's a young guy that hopefully can take that year 2 leap. And then you have a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who's, his future's up in the air. I don't expect him to pick up his 5th-year option, but they need to figure out this D-line. That's where I think if they are going to sign someone that's not on the team, it may be on the D line. There's some options out there. There's Khalil Mack rumors now getting a little started. Matt Mayoko said there's some possibility if he's willing to take a substantial decrease in pay, because the Chargers, they're over the cap, like $20 million over the cap. So he might become a cap hit. I don't know if he's a realistic option, but I think those are things that the 49ers may be looking at in terms of bolstering that D-line. You got Chris Kasurik. Nick Bosa talked about it the other day with Rich Sherman. Like, that guy can make someone great, So what do you think about the D-line?
It's probably the biggest need on this team, which is ironic because I think coming into training camp, every year these last few years, we talk about them like they're the strength of the team, and they usually are. They've got obviously the high-end talent, Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, and then they, obviously have had Javon Kinlaw the past few years, who's just a humongous person and a first-round talent. And then they've got all of these guys that are athletically, gifted and have just been coached up by Chris Kasurik and are able to perform on Sundays, but a ton of them are free agents, right? Samson Ebukam, he wasn't even a full-time edge rusher when he came to San Francisco. He, I think, had 6.5 sacks, 7 sacks, something like that last season. He was a good player. Was great against the run. He's a free agent. Charles Omenihu, who, amongst interior and exterior rushers, just one of those guys that consistently gets pressures. I think he had 6.5 sacks. Jordan Willis, good depth piece, like you mentioned. Kevin Givens. I mean, just a bunch of names that played huge snaps for the 49ers. And I think they got to go back and get some high-end talent. I think I was looking at adjusted sack rate, which basically looks at how many sacks you get over passing snaps. And I think the 49ers have just started to steadily decline from 2019. And in 2019, they just had high-end talent. D Ford, Defoe, Armstead, and young Bosa.
DJ Jones.
DJ Jones. And they just haven't been able to replicate that over the last few years just because, they traded Buckner, hoped Kinlaw would, be able to replace some of that. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy and on the field. And then, the D Ford thing didn't quite work out because of injuries. And they just haven't been able to find an edge rusher that's, consistent and is as talented as D Ford since that point. And hopefully Drake Jackson takes a leap, but I think they got to go into the free agent market. I think they got to try to sign, I think their splash signing last season was Mooney Ward. They know they needed a corner. They went out and signed him. I think they know they need either an edge rusher or a D tackle.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of edge rushers on the market that I think they can go ahead and sign that would make an impact. And so I think D-line is going to be one of those big priorities that you see them take care of come March 15th.
Yeah, I agree with that because, Nick Bosa, man, he obviously Defensive Player of the Year, 18.5 sacks this season was amazing. It was obviously crazy. But playoffs, I feel like he just wore down. He got a little gassed out. He didn't have the big impact that we were hoping. He didn't look like Nick Bosa of the season. He was still good. He was still getting double teams. But man, he needs some help on the other side, and it was interesting that they didn't even play Drake Jackson. He didn't even suit up for the last half of the season, basically. So it was kind of like, okay, this is a guy that they're expecting to come into camp and let's let him to work. Let's send a message to him. Even if he steps up and he can get 6 sacks, you still need another guy because the whole defensive line combined didn't have as many sacks as Nick Bosa. That to me is crazy. That's crazy to me. So you said there's some other. Who do you like? Give me a name. There's got to be a name that Akash wants on the 49ers, defensive end or defensive. Who do we get and who do we want? Who can we
tackle? I would love Javon Hargrave. I liked him a couple years ago when I think he was a Steeler and then the Eagles ended up signing him. He's a little older now, but if I wanted to go sign somebody, that Eagles defensive line would be the place to go. And Hargrave's a little older. I think he's 31 or 32. 30. He's right in that range. He's going to cost a pretty penny, but I think if you put him next to Armstead, hopefully Drake Jackson's able to take a step. You get Nick Bosa, and then maybe you bring some of these other depth guys back, whether it's a Willis or someone like that. Then all of a sudden, okay, now you're talking. Yeah. Deron Payne was the one that was kind of the big ticket, but I think the Commanders franchise tagged him. He's younger. He's a really good player, but he's going to cost a lot, and now you have to trade for him, which makes it complicated. Draymond Jones, the interior tackle for the Broncos, is another name that's been tossed out. He's a little bit younger too, but yeah, let's see. Those are some of the interior guys I like. Some of the edge guys. Marcus Davenport, his name's been thrown around quite a bit. He's athletic. I think someone Sarah could really coach up. He only had a half sack last season, which
he had a down year last year.
He had a down year. So that seems right up the Niners' alley, right?
Yeah.
Find someone that's on a down year, bring him in on a cheaper contract, and then hope that he improves within your system and your culture. And that would be the goal there with Davenport. But I think you got to get a defensive lineman, both in free agency and through the draft. It's also a position that they've met with a bunch of prospects at the combine. I think they addressed it in the draft. I know they get Kalia Davis back this season, who's smaller, but should provide some depth at the defensive tackle spot. So I think that's probably the first position you address come this March.
Yeah, I think so. To me, that's what I've said is you got to fortify the defensive side of the trenches. So I definitely think that's where they're going to look for. Davenport I like because he's coming off a down year. It reminds me of like a Arden Key. Okay, he's coming off a bad year. People kind of wrote him off. Right. You bring him in, Chris Kasurek, and he changes his career, and then boom, he goes and signs a big contract somewhere. So I could see that being the guy. The kid Ngaku, I think it's from the Colts. He had a good year, but he might cost a little bit too much for the 49ers.
He can't stop the run. That's his biggest problem. He's a true edge rusher, which is, I guess, what D Ford was.
Yeah, it's what you need. Just another guy that's going to attack the quarterback because everybody else can stop the run. But you're right. If you're looking for a complete guy, he may not be what we're looking for. Yeah, 100%.
Like a three down defense.
Yeah. He's going to be a one trick pony, specialist. But hey, I wouldn't mind it.
You need those guys too.
Yeah, I agree. I know. Flipping to the other side real quick here. Obviously, talk about D-line, but you can't talk about D-line without O-line. Offensive line, man, that's a big issue right now because obviously we know Mike McGlinchey. He's right tackle. He's free agent. He's probably going to get priced out, which we know. But you got Jake Brendel, Mr. Versatility, the Swiss Army knife. He's a free agent. And then Jake Brendel, right? Jake Brendel was a very solid center. I didn't expect much out of him. You lose Alex Mack. Well, you're in panic mode, and you're like, oh, God, this guy, Jake Brendel's never been a starter. 7 years in the NFL, and you're like, oh,
undersized.
Yeah, and he played good for first year as a starter at center. So where do we go at offensive line, man? Who the heck? Is it going to be Colton McKivitz playing right tackle? I hope not.
So I do think Mike McGlinchey is probably not returning just because I do think the 49ers value him, but they also have, a limit there. And I think similar to Laken Tomlinson last season, I think he's just going to get priced out. The supply demand for tackles is outrageous. There is far more demand than there is supply of good tackles, which is what Mike McGlinchey is. For all the complaining that happens on social media, he's an excellent run blocker. He's, an above average pass blocker, and those guys get paid. Those guys get paid at tackle, especially for someone that played, I think, all his games this past season. High character, good locker room guy as well. So I imagine there's just a team out there that's going to give him a contract that the Niners can't afford. So what do the Niners do? I think you go back to the youth well, whether that's Colton McKivitz, who's filled in as a spot starter for Trent Williams, week 18 in LA last season. He filled in for Trent Williams, I think, earlier this season, too, if I'm not mistaken, when Williams was out. So McKivitz is actually kind of the opposite of McGlinchey. He's a better pass blocker, not as good of a run blocker. So, a slightly different player, but hasn't played as much, obviously. But I think they do trust him there. And I think, salary cap league, you've got a team full of expensive guys. There has to be ways for, you to be able to replace starters like McGlinchey, who are good starters, with someone a lot cheaper. And I think that's the route they take. I don't think they address that position in free agency. There's a couple names like a Jawan Taylor and Isaiah Wynn, a Caleb McGarry, but I just think all those guys are going to be outside of the Niners price range. And so I think it's McKivitz. And then, you flip the page to the center position. Hopefully you can bring Jake Brendel back, 31-year-old, I think a little bit older, but had a good season, excellent pass blocker. And you would just, hope to bring him back on a 1-year deal. You do have Nick Zakel, the rookie draft pick from this past season, who I think was a guard, but I think they like him at center. I think they like how intelligent he is, which is something that's necessary in this offense. And then Jason Poe, the undrafted free agent who's an athletic superstar. I think he's a possibility at center if they don't bring back Brendel, but I don't expect them to make a splash signing there. along the offensive line. I think they just may replace some of the older guys that may leave with some of the younger guys, which is what they did last year, right? They replaced Tomlinson with Banks. That was a fantastic move. Brunskill and Burford kind of, did their rotation. I think Burford hopefully takes a step forward this season, and their offensive line was pretty good last season. They were more consistent probably than they get credit for, and it's just about maintaining that continuity as, if McGlinchey were to walk.
Yeah, I agree. I pretty much think that they're going to Nick Sikel, Jason Poe, they do have some young guys that I feel like they want to kind of take that next lead. And, people question the Aaron Banks move, and, man, that was a money move. I can't believe how great he was last year. And now he's going to be entering his next season and should get better, and Burford too. So I think with those two guys, they feel confident in where they're at. Again, right. I don't think – I agree with you. I don't think they make a big splash in the O-line department. I just think a lot of people are worried that – I think what it comes down to, and in my eyes – Colt McKivitz is not going to be good enough at right tackle, because you're right. His body of work is just so limited. But they did spend a draft pick a couple years back. They traded Matt Breida, went up, got the pick in the 5th round. They got McKivitz. So you got to give him his opportunity. I mean, if he doesn't pan out, then hopefully they've drafted someone good this year. And maybe you can keep Brunskill. That's why I want Brunskill, because, again, if McKivitz is having a bad time, you can slide Brunskill out there to the right. That man can do it all. So
O-line's hard, man. It's hard. There's a lot more defensive linemen coming out in the draft than there are offensive linemen. I know it's a common complaint among the Niners fan base, and it's hard to develop offensive linemen and to have 5 guys that are all healthy, that are all playing together, they're all playing well. It's not often you get offensive lines like the Eagles, and they have an excellent coach in Jeff Stoutland out there. They've got some veteran guys there, right? Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, that have been there for a while, and they've drafted, high talents multiple times. Mailata, and then Andre Dillard, right? So it's hard to build an offensive line. I think it's easier to go out and sign defensive linemen personally. So that's why I think they go the younger route.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's just not enough O-linemen coming out. Not enough good O-linemen coming out. And you're right, man.
Right.
It's just like you take what you can get. That Eagles O-line was like the Monstars from Space Jam to me. It was crazy.
And it still wasn't good enough to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I know, because the Chiefs O-line was even better, man. It's crazy.
Right.
Last thing I'll ask you, I know you got to bounce out of here soon, but so save the best for last. Obviously, there's a quarterback situation with the 49ers. Can you believe it? And John Lynch did mention this. He says, you know what? 49ers need to get may need to go look into the quarterback market to insulate themselves. Basically, another safety valve, because they don't know if both of their quarterbacks can stay healthy right now. We know Brock Purdy pending surgery, most likely next week.
I think.
Yeah, I think that's what the Athletic reported today. And then the other guy, Trey Lance, is coming off a fractured ankle. That's kind of serious, right? And also, something John Lynch kind of hinted towards is he needs to see the field. Best ability is availability. We've talked about it, many players on this team. And unfortunate for Trey Lance, he has had a lot of injuries. So they do need a guy that can be an insurance policy. Who are you looking at? What veteran quarterback are you looking at that the 49ers are going to be able to realistically sign? Obviously, it's not going to be Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers. Those guys are starters. We're not looking for a starter because you have these 2 young quarterbacks on a rookie contract. Who's your veteran quarterback, or a list of guys that you're realistically looking at?
Let me hit you with a name that I actually really like. Colt McCoy.
Woo!
Someone that's a little older, been in the NFC West. He's had success. He knows his role. And if you watch Hard Knocks, he comes across as just a really high character guy.
Yeah.
I think that's what the Niners need. I don't think they necessarily need to go out and sign, like you mentioned, a Derek Carr, trade for an Aaron Rodgers. It depends obviously on where Brock Purdy's injury and his rehab timeline is. But
yeah,
I just think you got to bring in a veteran who's been a backup in this league, who has played games, who knows how to win, just high character, high locker room, someone that you just enjoy having in that quarterback room. Colt McCoy feels like that type. Some of the names that are listed here, right? I was going to say Cooper Rush is another name that I like. Andy Dalton's been tossed around a bunch.
Yeah.
Matt Ryan might be shot. I don't know how good his play is. His character and his football IQ is probably off the charts. Yeah. He's been in this offense before with Shanahan, so he'd be a great mentor. But he just did not play well last season, so I don't know if you can depend on him if he needed to come in and win a couple games. But I think it really depends on what happens with Brock Purdy's surgery.
Yeah.
Right. So if he gets the surgery this week, let's say his recovery timeline is 6 months, and we got to be conservative with that stuff because with the Niners, it feels like it always gets pushed out and there's always setbacks and all that stuff. And, I feel like he, starts the season on PUP or, doesn't play the first half of the season, whatever, right? Now you got Trey Lance. And Trey Lance obviously coming off of foot surgery. And it's not just the foot. I feel like a lot of people get hung up on that. He's had a finger injury. He had an ankle last season. He's had his fair share of, freak deal injuries too. And so he's got to stay healthy. He's got to take a step and improve because they're going to bring back a team that's going to be ready to win. And they're not going to want to, go through the whole development, 2 quarterback timeline, like none of that stuff. They're going to want to hit the ground running. Because that's been the knock the last few seasons is they've started slow. They've started 3-5. They started 3-4, and they've had to then kind of hit the ground running. And imagine if they, start the season fast like they did in 2019. Then all of a sudden you're talking about, the 1 seed and home field advantage and a bye and things that really matter come playoff time. And so, yeah, I think Purdy's injury timeline is probably going to dictate what they do at quarterback. Hopefully it's nothing serious. Hopefully it's just the internal brace procedure and he's back, early in the season. Hopefully Trey Lance takes a step. I know he's going to be determined and he's going to be motivated and hopefully that translates. And I think, a lot of people are arguing like who should play and who should start. And honestly, I think it's going to play itself out, right? Purdy's injury timeline is going to dictate, when he returns and then Lance. It's up to Lance. He's got an opportunity now. He's going to have a chance to potentially start the season. If he comes out and looks good and is able to win some games, they're probably not going to switch quarterbacks at that point.
Unless he gets hurt. Yeah. 100%.
Unless he gets hurt, right? Unless he gets hurt.
We know Brock can come in mid-season and go crazy like he did last year. So you're right. It's the golden opportunity for Trey Lance, who, as you said, he's not just the ankle injury. He's had a multitude of injuries. I think people forget those things that kind of limited him. If he could come in and right the ship and they're 5-2 instead of 3-4, they may not pull the plug and say, "Yo, Trey's the guy that."
Like, this is what we drafted. This is what we traded 3 first-round picks for, and let's just keep going. So that would be the best case scenario.
That's best case scenario.
That's best case.
And if he falls flat on his face, and Brock Purdy, hey, let's 6-7, and now he's ready by week 5-6. Guess what? Now we're good to go. And then you have a backup plan. Your backup that you have is okay. Trey's hurt. Now your QB3 is now QB2 again, basically. And you just roll with that guy. I like Colt McCoy. I honestly didn't think of Colt McCoy, but man, that I'll go back to.
He made like $1 million last season.
He's like nothing.
He's willing to take that type of contract.
Yeah, he can win
like
games.
32 years old.
He knows his role, and he just knows I'm going to sit there, hold the clipboard in case of emergency. And that the HBO Hard Knocks, man, that episode with Colt McCoy was crazy. He was sitting there grinding film. Kyler was nowhere to be found, and he was like with the coach at the end, just like, I knew I could beat these guys.
He was talking about the Niners defense. He was like, I knew every single thing they were doing out there, and it's probably believable. He's a bright guy, but yeah, I just think the OTAs are going to be really important for Trey Lance. He's going to have to come out there and show that he's taken a step, and we'll see. Then the wild card that's always floating out there is the Tom Brady guy.
Oh man,
you
think they can get him? You think he'll come out of retirement? Maybe here's a paint a picture. Week 10, Trey's struggling. Brock Purdy surgery goes longer than it expected. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, give Brady a call. Hey, it's week 10. 49ers are like 4-5. They're 5-5. They're middle of the road. Save us. Take us to the Super Bowl. You think it happens?
I wouldn't even think it takes that long. I imagine we'll get an idea like in April, May, right? Because that's what happened this season.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
OTAs and training camp started. Trey Lance was out there. He was inconsistent is probably the most accurate word. And 49ers brass got worried. They said, Jimmy Garoppolo guy still around. Let's insulate ourselves and let's keep him around just in case, this doesn't work out. And so, we'll get an idea pretty quickly of how Kyle Shanahan feels about his quarterback and Trey Lance. And if he's not confident, I promise you they're going to try to hit up Brady and be like, you can come back and win number 8 at home. I promise that John Lynch texted him that along with his birthday wishes this past week.
I'm sure he did, because he said, I'm going to leave it at that. I know there was a little bit more than you have a good career. I'm sure there was a little bit more.
100%.
And he's the one guy that doesn't need to come into training camp. He's Tom Brady. He can figure it out. So
or needs to be traded for, or is going to, he's probably looking at a 1-year deal right? It's the one that makes the most sense.
It does.
Right? An Aaron Rodgers thing, you need to trade for him. He makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
I don't know if he fits with this locker room. The Tom Brady thing makes just more sense. It's just a matter of, does he want to play? Does he want to play for the Niners? All that type of stuff.
Does he want to come out of retirement one more time?
One more time, right?
We'll see. Right. It is going to be interesting. And you're right. A lot of it is dictated on Brock's return and if
Trey Lance,
Kyle trusts Trey Lance. That's it. He's got a golden opportunity, my man. But Akash, I appreciate you, man. Tell the beautiful people, where can they find you? What are you up to in the next couple of weeks? What's up, man?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at AKASHANAV, Instagram, my full name, Akash Navarathan. You can find me there as well. Just pumping out free agent content. I think, free agency starts in a couple weeks. So more stuff just about free agent targets, analysis on salary cap when contracts get signed, hopefully player big breakdowns when they do make some signings. And then we'll turn the page to the draft. I always hate going into the draft stuff and then having to pivot to free agency and then going back to draft. So I usually start with free agency, and then once that's done, kind of here in the next few weeks, we'll turn to the draft. And next thing you know, it'll be OTAs, and we'll be back to training camp before you blink.
Yeah, before you know it, it goes quick. Like we sit there and dread it, but next thing you know, it's gonna be, oh crap, it's June already. So
it's been more than a month since the NFC title game. It doesn't feel like it. So
it really doesn't. It goes by quick when you keep yourself busy. But I appreciate you, my man. Thanks for hopping in. I'm gonna end real quick, people. Everybody, make sure you hit that like button, all that good jazz. And thank you to Akash for hopping in. I'll be back in about 15 minutes. We got Dr. Pandya. We're gonna talk about Brock Purdy and Trey Lance's injuries and how they relate in an orthopedic world. So we'll be back soon.